Good evening, everybody. So we're at the end, I can tell you're straggled around. So what we're going to try and do here is address the subject at hand, but also touch on some of the themes that have been discussed in the last couple of days, and indeed some that haven't, mostly because when we were discussing beforehand, we thought they deserved touching on. The theme at hand is the long and the short term and brand building. Before I ask the panel to introduce themselves, let me just say a couple of things about this. I always like to start by saying it's always important to know what a definition of a brand is. I have two that I like in particular. One said by Arun Sarin, a brand is what a brand does, and the other by Jeff Bezos, which is a brand is what people say about you when you're not in the room. Now, why these two are relevant is one is all about the day-to-day activity and that's short term, and the other is all about your reputation. And in this digital age we're in, I think they matter a lot. So if you're in the kind of job I'm in, you've got no choice but to think long term, because to recover our brand short term would indeed be impossible. So, you know, we're doing that, thinking short but thinking long at the same time. Touch on that later if you like. But meanwhile, let me turn our attention to, we've got a great cross-section here of client, ex-client, ex-agency, but client, research and media agency. Jane, should we start with you? Tell us all about yourself and something that isn't in your CV.
Okay, so hi everybody, I'm Jane Christian. So I work at MediaCom, been at MediaCom for 16 years, and I head up our business science team. Business science is a team that measures effectiveness, the outcomes that are driven by our clients' campaigns, and we work really closely then with our clients to optimise their future plans. What you probably don't know about me is I'm a really keen golfer. You didn't know that I was keen, did you? No, that's one of my favourite football team, but I'm not very good.
So, keen golfer, what's your handicap?
34.
Oh, right,
if you know golf, that's
keen,
bad.
Yeah. So, Louise.
So I'm Louise Ainsworth. I'm CEO of Kantar, Millward, Brown in the UK, and we work with many brands, in fact many of the brands who've been here, on helping them build their brand performance and drive communications effectiveness in the marketplace. I joined Millward Brown relatively recently. I've moved around quite a lot. My background is quite broad. I've worked client side at Shell. I was at the BBC for a while, at Bay in the Strategy House. I've been at a digital agency at Ogilvy Group for a while, and at Nielsen in the digital audience measurement space. So generally kind of honing in on what we do at Millward Brown, actually, which is all about brands, building brands, and how to do that in a digital age effectively.
Fantastic. And Ed?
So yes, I'm Ed. I'm the Marketing and Innovation Director for Diageo across Europe, so that's across our 50-odd countries across Europe, and look after all our brands there. I started as a graduate trainee at Diageo as Guinness, because I loved the Guinness brand, basically, and wanted to work for it. Had a couple of years out in hair care, worked for L'Oreal for a couple of years, and then actually spent most of my career outside of the UK, so I had 16 years on the road, working in places like Australia, Latin America for many years, and in global jobs as well. So actually I only moved back here a couple of years ago, so actually most of my career has been outside of the UK. So therefore think of something that you don't know, probably be something outside of the UK. I've been in a couple of hurricanes, few hurricanes.
Oh wow.
I seem to be attracted to them.
Whereabouts?
I was in Cancun a few years ago when I was a student in Hurricane Gilbert. I was stranded for about 3 days. That was a big one. That came through 190 miles an hour. Yeah. Katrina, that went out here earlier. I was there.
Right,
yeah.
Well, no hurricane coming here, don't worry.
Yeah.
So listen, can we start with you, because I think in the pre-chat, you know, when we were talking about your view of brand building short-term and long-term, I think you bring something very interesting to this debate. So we've been talking about the last couple of days. You know, what's your view, and what's your view with the brands you're stewarding at the moment?
Right, so one of the things we've been talking about is, it sounds a bit of a cliche, but the long term is made up of a lot of short terms. And I think it's something we all have to wrestle with as brand builders. So I think we need to be really clear that, you know, we are building, we have clear brand visions, we know what our brand's about, what the purpose is, what they're trying to achieve, and we have to be setting that. But, you know, we also build in the short term as well, because, you know, all the time we have to be looking at what's working, what's effective, and how we drive it. So I think the important thing is, and it does sound really obvious, is being really clear what your North Star is, where you're going, what your vision is, all that sort of good stuff. But the long term is made up of short terms, and we have to deliver performance. And actually, I think at the heart of effectiveness, and it's a very live conversation for for us in Diageo, and I'm sure with loads of businesses at the moment, is, you know, how do you drive greater levels of performance by being much more effective in what you do? And I think we've got a greater lens on effectiveness and productivity than ever before. And I think it leans to, you know, we've got to be constantly learning. And, you know, building a sort of a learning culture where you kind of learn what's working, what's not working, stop what isn't, and, you know, the stuff that is working, put more into it because it's going to drive performance. And I think that has to be kind of almost like a quarterly rhythm to that.
Easily said, not so easily measured,
yeah,
I suspect.
Exactly.
So, what are the key metrics that you're looking at when you're doing that?
Like I said to Louise next to me. So, so we do generally. So one is at a brand level, we do look at equity is really important. So long-term equity is absolutely critical. So, you know, meaning, difference, salience is really, really important. So we absolutely look at those. So tracking that is important because that has to be long-term metrics. Penetration. At the end of the day, penetration is absolutely critical. So, you know, have we got more? Are we recruiting more consumers into our brands and setting those? So one of my goals is at a macro level to make sure we've got a big penetration target by brand, and to make sure that everything we do filters into driving penetration. So, which then ladders into recruitment, and therefore is the work we're doing is effective in terms of recruitment. So I think those are two, but, you know, for me it's almost like, what are your MDS scores? What's your penetration target? If you get more people in, then the financial metrics will start to happen.
And Louise, you were talking earlier about the correlation between some of these longer-term metrics and the short-term ones. Could you elucidate that a little bit?
Well, so picking up on what Ed was saying about MDS, so that stands for meaningful, different and salient, and those kind of fit into our brand equity model, which is based on you know, the Brand Z framework. We have over 10 years, we've done something like 3 million surveys of consumers worldwide, and been able to identify what builds a successful brand in the long term. And that's very much around being able to innovate, to carve out a meaningfully different positioning, but also to deliver a fantastic brand experience. And it's the brands who achieve both of those that are seen to kind of succeed at that macro level. We've also done quite a lot of work recently then bringing together brand performance data and sales data, and we've identified from that the number one metric for success is salience, so being top of mind to the point we were talking about. Yeah. And that drives success both in the short term and the long term. So that chimes very much with some of the conversations I've heard over the last couple of days. We've talked about, you know, people use different language. They talk about fame, they talk about other metrics, but it's essentially getting at the very same point. But I think what's really interesting over and above that is the importance of affinity. And you know, affinity is almost as important in driving short-term sales and long-term sales. And the brands that manage to get the salience and the affinity, so the meaningful difference, are the ones who actually spectacularly overperform. And that's really, I guess, what's underpinning the work that we do with
So I know you can't give best practice examples, except obviously Ed. So is this a...
And we didn't plan this, by the way.
Yeah, spontaneous.
All right.
So best practice
I mean,
in terms
which
of...
brands of Ed's are you measuring where you're seeing this combination work?
Well, I would say, I mean, I'd look at some of our brands where, you know, so for example, to be candid, I mean, some of our whiskey brands where in Europe over the last few years we haven't invested as much money as we would have liked to because we've been focused on building Guinness, making sure our vodka brands like Smirnoff are in good nick, building Captain, et cetera, et cetera. So you make prioritisation, obviously, across your portfolio. But actually, so some of them, I think we've done, it's quite interesting. If you think another way of looking at MDS is, I think on some brands, I often talk about share penetration and equity. I think you can keep a brand doing pretty well in a category by just winning share, by just being out there, making it visible, call it physical availability, and just doing better than your competition at the point of sale for a period of time. And I think on some of our brands, we did that, being pragmatic. But what you see on a lot of those brands where we've done it and we've kept our share performance, actually what we see is our meaning scores start to go down because we haven't been engaged in an effective dialogue with our consumers. And so a couple of our brands where we've got that, actually the task now is all about rebuilding our meaning because we've been visible at the point of sale, but we haven't done enough in terms of engaging in a dialogue. A brand like Guinness, I would say, where we're very visible in countries like GB and Ireland, you know, actually we've got very good salience because we're high. We're seen as very different, actually, and actually it is actually keeping the meaning ticking along, but actually we're in a pretty good place on it.
Great. And Jane, turning to you in business science, I thought that was something to do with Bake Off when I read that. But it's the use of analytics, use of data. I mean, are you getting the metrics from clients that help you do a great job?
Well, a lot of the time we're trying to model those metrics to actually tie them to a business outcome. Yes, on the whole, but I think, going back to your original question around, are we being, too short-termist or long-termist? I think we are generally. My first ever client that I worked on coined a phrase which I stole and I still love, which is you can optimise yourself into a suboptimal position. And I think what he meant by that was...
Who did he work for?
Actually, Direct Line Group, which is
right,
part of the RBS group back in
was,
those times, in that time. And I think that's brilliant, and it's a real focus for me through my career, because I think it's very easy to measure short-term effects. And that usually, therefore, is what we base our decisions on in the market. And I know we've talked about the importance of driving long-term. What we're not very good at in industry is really quantifying the business outcomes that our communications drive in the long term. And I'm really pleased to hear Louise talking about how they're linking brand health scores to actual business performance. But I know with a lot of the brands that I work in, most decisions are made over looking at a period of, say, what return you get in 3 months. So if you build a plan based on what works best, what messages, what media channels work best in, say, a 3-month period, what you'll get is a plan that will deliver you the best it can in a 3-month period. You really need to know what drives sales longer term, what drives business outcomes longer term. And what I say, we know we need to do that, and the reason why we know that and that we about that is that we'll quite often see, work with our clients, and they'll say, look, we also want to drive awareness or consideration. And I think that's nice to have. It's nice to have in a scorecard. But what I really want to push them to do is to say, right, but if we increase consideration by what point, how many business outcomes will that drive for you? What comms channels, what messages work best at driving those business outcomes, so we can properly optimise short-term, long-term.
So to switch gear a little bit and to touch on a theme that doesn't sound like it's been talked about much in the last couple of days, and it's the subject of digital metrics. And because I was caught swearing recently by Marketing Week, I won't say what I'd usually say about digital metrics, but I think some of them can be challenged. I mean, how are you seeing those, given what you just said, Jane? And how do you particularly see the challenge of, the people in the ecosystem that are dominating at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, obviously digital's really important, but I think there's a focus on metrics which are not outcomes, talking about impressions and how many people engaging. For me, that's not what I'm interested in. I'm interested in how many sales something's driving. And a worrying thing for me in the digital landscape is that measurement, because of digital, is moving to be more short-term focused even. Digital attribution modelling is something that I think all businesses should probably invest in if they spend a lot in digital. But it gives you a very narrow view of performance. It isn't going to help you make the right decisions longer term. So that, to me, that is a worry. And
do you get access to client data and analytics, or are you being left on your own to work out the client data?
It's mixed. It really is mixed. A lot of our clients are very collaborative, and all the teams and agencies that they work on, in terms of all the insights, it could be brand tracking, digital, sometimes work together well. Sometimes you get people holding on to stuff, and actually, from an agency point of view, we just want to take everything that exists to inform our decisions and get a clear overall view rather than siloed views.
And Louise, your view?
On digital measurement, I mean, I think that it is possible to measure the impact of digital ads at a very granular level and look at what's driving performance in market for a specific campaign. I think where a lot of the challenges are coming, where people are looking more broadly at what's working within specific media properties, or how am I driving reach, or your point about fraud. And these are big issues that are actually really hard to solve, and they do need to be solved at an industry level. I don't think it is straightforward to point the finger either at the research companies or the media providers. It's a difficult, challenging job.
It is. And Ed, something that troubles you?
Yeah, it does a bit.
Digital fraud?
Digital fraud does, because I was saying we had a big session on it recently, and it's kind of alarming because you wonder how much of your money is being basically totally and utterly wasted. So yes, absolutely, it is alarming. What we're doing about it is difficult, actually. I'm not too sure, because it's out there and it's a conversation. I think it's a live conversation, and we have to be aware of it. So so yes, don't have an answer, but yeah, it's slightly concerning.
Yeah, so I mean, it is a theme, strange not to see it addressed. I think that's the big thing. And as I was saying earlier, for those that don't know, digital ad fraud is actually the second biggest organised crime in the world. And it's something that we should all be concerned about and look into a little bit more. A big subject for the WFA, I think you'll hear more about that. I mean, continuing the theme of things that we maybe haven't heard enough about, and sorry to put you a bit on the spot. You know, conferences, everybody collaborates, everybody turns nicey-nicey. I've always enjoyed the panels where there's a bit of tension in the system, and the tension I want to put here is about remuneration and collaboration and how clients work with agencies and whether agencies are transparent and rewarded fairly. So I'm sorry, a bit of a wrap on this, but Ed, you know, would you say that you reward your agencies fairly?
Yes.
But would they?
Would they? I think. Look, I think it's one of these. It's a very live conversation again. I think we do. We absolutely want to be fair without again sounding too cliched. You know, we value the partnerships we've got. You know, we want win-win partnerships and all of that sort of stuff. So we absolutely do. I think we want our partners to be part of our collective success. So again, if we're successful, so it's something we were chatting about beforehand, but you know, a lot of the goals and the part has to be delivered around our business success. And in theory, if we're successful, then that helps back to the success of the agency, and that's what you want. So you have to be, if you're in one of our partners, the goal has to be about what are we doing to ultimately drive our business performance. If our business performance is delivering, then I absolutely think that our agency partners should get some reward for that because they are helping to deliver success of our business. So that's the conversation we're in. I think we have bonus schemes and systems like that, which we have, some PRIP systems and stuff like that, which are okay. But I think we can probably keep revising them as well, actually.
And what role do you have with procurement in these discussions?
So quite a lot. I mean, you know, it's probably we've just been through a fairly big media pitch. For example, we take the media, and that's a big engagement driven by procurement. So we have obviously quite a reasonable sized procurement function who get into a lot of the negotiation. But then at the end of the day, in terms of choice of agency and then agreeing what the remuneration looks like, then absolutely it has to involve a few of us, shall we say.
Yeah, because, you know, my view on this is, you know, clients must take responsibility for making sure everybody's fairly rewarded and indeed for managing procurement so that they understand what they're doing. So maximising the value.
Yeah, I don't want the procurement guys grinding agencies into the ground. I mean, and you can get into this deep level of negotiation, which doesn't feel particularly healthy at times, but...
I mean, I feel very much that the incentives need to support and reward collaboration, and that's one of the big messages that's come out very positively from the last couple of days for me has been that opportunity to collaborate more to drive effectiveness. It's about building a shared understanding of what effectiveness means for a client, making sure that the research partners are clear about what they're measuring, make sure that the agencies are involved, understand it, to your point earlier, so that you actually know what driving something in the brand equity will do for delivering successful outcomes from a commercial point of view.
And do you feel that you're putting a team on behalf of a client when you see the best kind of collaboration at work?
Yes, I mean, certainly we work most successfully with clients where we are able to have open discussions with them and their agencies, and we're able to share information between the three parties. Yeah. I think where we're least successful is where we're brought in to mark people's homework, and that doesn't work for all parties. Yeah.
And what about in the media world? Have you ever been involved in a pitch where you promised to optimise their media and save clients money?
Everyone.
Everyone.
Yeah.
And do you think that's a fair thing to do?
As long as it's for as long as it hits the client's objectives. Yeah, I've got to be very careful because we have Jem, who's one of our long-standing clients down in the audience there. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, what the mantra, I mean, what you were saying a second ago, our mantra for us is that we will only grow as a business if we grow our clients' business. Yeah. So we have to constantly keep a focus on that in anything that we do within the agency, any decision that we make.
Fantastic. And what's the...
I was going to say, no, the challenge at times is it's back to the collaboration when you've got multiple agencies, because you could look at the media agency, and it's interesting because having been through it, we do want financial returns, we want the media to be bought effectively and all that sort of fairly traditional stuff, but you also then want brilliant plans which help to drive ROI. Mm-hmm. But what you don't want to get into is, we did brilliant plans and we built the ecosystem, we're very clear what goes on each, but then the content was a bit crap.
Yeah.
Blame the, and then you turn up and say, well, actually, we told you that a little while ago, but you didn't listen. Yeah. And it's like, the collaboration piece is really important because everyone's got a piece in it. So you come back to driving, as a client, our business goals. Yeah. There are multiple people engaged, but you just got to break that down and be really clear. And then also really respect what the individual people have done in terms of contributing towards the business success.
I mean, I think there is something else that sort of has cropped up in my mind, having listened to some of the conversation, has also been sort of the difference or the need to have KPIs that are really significant and clear, such as the ones we were talking about earlier, that they're almost on the leadership agenda and everybody in the organisation understands those. But also using metrics. I was in a really interesting presentation. Some of you will have seen the PepsiCo presentation earlier. Tim Warner was just talking about some very micro metrics, if you like, that help drive performance for individual brands and optimising on those. And the reality is those should never be the KPI that's driving the overall business, because they may be quite micro, quite digital, or quite whatever, but they are actually important for that brand in those circumstances, in that context.
Excellent. All right, so listen, I think looking at the watch here, we're going to turn first to Patrick. Patrick from the IPA, going to talk a little bit about what was announced this morning, but also significantly how he's going to build on what we've all heard for the last couple of days and get it out and about. Patrick, what was announced earlier today?
The announcement was that we were forming the Effectiveness Institute, which aims to carry on the learnings from the last 2 days throughout eternity, one hopes. My team, the Professional Development Department at the IPA, are hoping to play a very integral role in this by creating more sort of agile, if you like, learning entities where we can aggregate the substance, and I love that reinterpretation of content we heard earlier, calling it substance, from these 2 days, and package it up in a way that is effective learning for people all around the world. And we can populate this area with video content, with talks, with case studies, you name it, and hopefully host discussions about topical issues, host webinars, and get the views of people from all around the world who are already involved in accessing IPA learning and development as well.
And have you seen that change over time? How much has the access gone up since we entered the last 10 years of total change, I would call this?
Well, I mean, our model has completely changed, and we're looking at completely reimagining our program, actually, for today's learners, because they're so time pressured. I read a marvellous statistic that on average an employee devotes 1% of their working week to learning and development. So for those of you who've been here for the last 2 days, that's it. There is no more. And I think everyone is squeezed and under pressure. And actually, the IPA's history was in long-form, agreeable residential courses, and they're unsustainable as entities. So we're working on how we can reform those into using the same sort of practitioner-led approach, but in something more agile that reflects the changing world, but is also based on core best practices, and also that are more accountable. So one of the critical things is making sure that people are measuring the outcomes of the learning. And I think, we've seen years and years and years of happy sheets, as they're affectionately known. But actually what we want to encourage agencies and clients and anyone interested is that they need to find out what people are learning and how they're using it, because that's the way you can tell it's become effective. So I think all the stories that have been told in the last 2 days are absolutely the same for training as.
So this is open access learning for everybody?
It is. The idea is that it will be very democratic. I went to...
Does that mean free?
No.
There you go.
Not always. Some of it will be, of course. But I went to a CPD conference yesterday, and one of the big things from all the professions is to make sure that things like professional accreditation, which young people are really craving, is open to all. It is no longer the domain of the superstars. You have to include everybody. And I think that's a great thing, and that's what we want to do.
And access across the ecosystem, so clients, agencies?
Yeah, that's what we want. Yeah, I mean, actually, we already welcome clients, and we've had many brands participate in our qualifications program. And our program runs all around the world. So I know we've got friends from New Zealand, Australia, and Canada in the audience. They've all reaped the benefits of what we do, so that's...
Good, well, it's great to see it continue. I started in the ad industry, and I remember the IPA courses fondly.
Yes.
I have to say, I think the work that you guys, the IPA, has done in the industry over the last few decades in terms of building an effectiveness culture already has been so important. When I was at Walk, I could see around the world how people were learning from the IPA studies, and also being able to benchmark what happens here in the UK and see the diaspora of planners who've grown up in that effectiveness culture going out there. So I think it's a great initiative.
But I mean, can I, before we go to questions, one last subject to touch on? It's something you and I emailed on earlier in the week, Jane, which is, are you finding that clients have got the necessary capability to get the best out of you? Because it's a leading question, because my observation is it's almost impossible to have a kind of client team that understands everything it needs to understand about the multiple channels available. I mean, the old-fashioned, rigorous discipline of marketing, absolutely, creativity. But in your area, I worry that clients have just outsourced everything and no longer understand what's happening. Is that a view you're subscribed to?
It depends. The big ones, I think, are really good.
That guy over there is excellent.
I think the big ones are really good. I think a lot of clients have been big enough to actually take analytics and measurement in-house, which means totally fine as long as it's still shared and you get that collaboration that we've talked about. That's all important. I think if you're a small client and you can't have as many specialisms, then probably not. You probably haven't got enough people on the effectiveness side of things, especially as things are changing. We can't keep up with it, let alone somebody client side. So potentially not. Oh, no.
Paddy Barwise made a great comment yesterday about the fact that nobody can understand everything that's going on in marketing at the moment. The world is becoming so complex. So it's how do you get the experts together with the people who can actually connect the dots between the different disciplines and make sure that you're joining them up. There's a whole kind of culture change around that.
I think it's just the important thing, though, is having the desire internally to focus on effectiveness. If you've got a strong leader that really buys into that, then I think you can rely on outsourcing things and having partners and it works. But there's still some businesses that don't have that focus and you can't win then.
And I agree. I mean, we have, one thought is, there's so much going on as a client, sometimes you don't know what you don't know. So there's a bit like we do expect our partners to bring us new thinking, new ideas, all that sort of stuff the whole time, and just what's going on, because you can't keep up with everything. So that's a sort of basic, that's probably me talking there. But then the other piece is, what we've tried to do is have small groups of specialist teams who really are specialists, whether it's in media, some hardcore kind of digital skills, et cetera, search, et cetera, et cetera, who are very good at that, and they love that, that's what they love doing. So we've got some fairly hardcore data people, et cetera, but not too many, because you don't want them doing everything. So you don't want a group of media planners who then go, you want them to help to sort of upskill the people across the business who are the more generalists, the people running the brands, but they're there to bring the expertise, and they work brilliantly with our partners as well. So that's and it's kind of working. It's not perfect, but it's kind of working.
All right, and with that, anybody got any questions before we sum up? You don't look like you're going to be a very active audience at this time in the evening. Oh, we've got one. Excellent.
Jane Asher, 23 Red. I'm quite interested in innovation. And Ed, you obviously title Marketing and Innovation Director, but also the whole sort of tension between the short term and the long term, the role of innovation and how that sort of fits into the equation.
You want to talk about that? So in our business, two key things for us on innovation is penetration and premiumisation. So we tend to do it if it can drive penetration, bring new users into our business, brilliant. If it can premiumise the business, brilliant. We want to do that because that helps our gearing. So that's the first thing. We do want to do it that we will do innovation off either our big core businesses. So, for example, innovating off a Guinness or a Smirnoff is important but only again if we believe it can generally be substantive and can help to grow the business by bringing new users to the brand. Otherwise, you'll cannibalize. And we'll also launch new brands as well because we're a portfolio business. And then one of the challenges can be short-term, long-term. we should be looking to do pretty much everything long term, but there are always pressures in terms of short-term delivery on innovation, which is pace, and you just have to manage that tension. But putting out stuff which is just purely short-term to hit a number at the end of the financial year is not particularly helpful, and we try and shy away from that. But sometimes it's about timing. So sometimes timing launches at the right time to make it sort of fiscally attractive is obviously prudent.
Anybody got one up the back there as well?
Hello, hi panel. Karen Fraser from the Advertising Association. As you've already pointed out, panel, there are some fantastic courses, loads of learning, IPA and Walk and many other places as well, but does anybody on the panel feel that there's anything left to learn, and what would they like to see?
Oh, God.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I'll start while the others ponder this. I mean, I think this industry is wonderful because there's not a single day goes by when you don't learn something new if you are open to it. And that's probably the simple truth. So on the one hand, I believe in the tenets of marketing as it's always been, and the simple truth of that. But on the other, you know, I could reel off what I learned this morning about something. There is so much to learn, and I think that's what makes it a great industry to work in. There are endless things for us to learn. So, you know, why I'm challenging digital metrics is I'm fascinated by, there are some that are fantastic. So if I look at what's happening with our NatWest work at the moment, you know, Google rang up, got fantastic 55 million impressions, who gives a shit? They then said, you know, this number of people have viewed the video, who cares, what do they mean, did they watch the whole thing? But then when you get to how many people have liked it, how many have disliked it, but much more significant than that, who has shared it, because that's somebody who's being brave enough to go, I like this, I'm sharing it with you. So for me, that's a really powerful metric. The rest of it is irrelevant. Now, I don't see anybody challenging digital metrics enough, so I want to challenge it. But I love this industry because it's a constant learning opportunity. Guys and gals?
Yeah, I would echo that. I mean, I think certainly, again, one of the messages that I've seen from the last couple of days has been a lot of focus on this need for continuous learning and a recognition that we've all got more to learn about how to join the dots. But I think also one of the interesting points is around this sort of idea of metrics at the coalface and finding the metrics that matter for your business, and then finding the way of making those kind of micro learnings about that actually work, why did that work, making sure that is shared within the business. So I think, yes, huge amounts, but very often very specific to a brand and a context.
Yeah, I know. I mean, totally. I think this industry is full of people who are hopefully naturally curious and they want to learn and find out what's going on in the world. There's a sort of natural curiosity, I think, to most people probably in this room and beyond. So I think we have to keep learning. We were chatting a little bit earlier. I mean, the digital area, I totally concur with what David's saying. There's so much to learn. But even in our industry, we do a lot of, it might sound like basic old-fashioned marketing, but it's sampling. You know, we need to make sure that people kind of get liquid on lips. And, you know, but you could very simply just say, here you go, here's a nice new Bailey's liquid, would you like to try it? But how do you get into a science there? How do you learn what's really works, what doesn't work? How do you make it more effective the whole time? Constantly improving it. So even stuff like that, which seems pretty basic, you've got to be constantly learning about how to improve it, learn what works, et cetera, et cetera. So, and want to have conversations about that. You know, you want to have a conversation about how a little sample can drive to sales. And at the end of the day, it's all about, for our business, about selling more and growing our brands and growing our equity of our brands.
Can I add one more point on that? I think one of the things that it was quite interesting yesterday, I don't know how much it was the polling issue, that it was a question about, do you have enough knowledge at your fingertips? And people going, yeah, we do. And we were all really surprised because we didn't think that they did. But one of the things that really strikes me is that it's actually the people at the front line who need the knowledge. And quite often we all think everybody knows this. Everyone knows that penetration matters. Everyone knows the importance of some of these kind of fundamentals, but it's how you get that out there and activated on the street.
And there's an interesting trend for this sort of thing called just-in-time learning. So people have less knowledge, young people perhaps, maybe all of us, I don't know, and they are learning on the hoof from their mobile. Critical facts to solve immediate problems.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's good or bad yet, but it is certainly something's happening.
Yeah, why fill your brain with the knowledge until you need it?
Yeah, you just need to know what questions to ask and then how to sift through the answer.
This is a good question. You've got 4 answers. I'm going to build it a little bit more. At the moment, we use I've no idea why Facebook have done this. They used to call it Facebook at Work, but now it's called Workplace. So we have an internal system, and we use that for the front line. And one of the fastest growing workplace sites is our site that's about closed loop feedback, what's happening in the front line. And actually I sit watching that, and people doing #WeAreWhatWeDo and sharing it with other people. It's magnificent to see. But I think all these channels help us do things. And last word for you on this one,
Yeah, I
Jane?
think my take would be a bit different. I think there's plenty of training out there. I think what's lacking is the desire of really specialist people to learn just general marketing skills. So, we talked a lot about data scientists, very digitally specialised people. I think we need to understand a little bit more about what they do, and they need to understand a bit more of a kind of wider marketing principle, so we can all work together a bit better and talk the same language sometimes, which doesn't always happen.
Yes, because I think things like, I don't hear many people talking about stakeholder engagement and influencing skills, because when I was an agency guy, I thought the man or the woman sitting in front of me was actually the person that said yes. I had no idea that behind them they had to go and convince an entire army of other people, and if they didn't, it wouldn't work. So I think there's a lot to learn. Any final question? All right, well, my final question of everybody is, when I sign off people going to conferences, because I do a lot, and I think it's a great opportunity to learn, I always say, you can go to this conference as long as you can come back and tell me what you've learned and what you're going to do differently about what you've heard and how you're going to take it back into the office. So can I just ask each of you whether you've heard anything this afternoon, this week, that is going to cause a change in your behaviour when you get back to the office, or some burning thing you want to share with somebody else? Jane?
I think, well, the first thing I heard, for me, Les and Peter was it Monday afternoon when they did their talk. Frankly, everything they said in that, I'm dying to get back to the agency, because it's what I've been banging on about for quite a long time, and having so much more evidence, I'm going to get it.
You've been proved right, have you?
It is, and they've expanded on it, so
Excellent.
I'm really keen to share
That's
that.
good news. And Louise?
For me, it's collaboration. It's how do we make sure we're collaborating as well as we can and embedding what we learn within the client.
I was going to say the same thing.
Oh, sorry.
But accurate, I think, and I haven't been here the whole time, but the importance of collaboration is really, really important. Back to the point I made about, we work with multiple people, and actually how you bring people together to drive to a single goal, basically, is what we need to be doing.
Okay, and to end on collaboration, I think one of the things that I would say is what's great about what the IPA have done this week is to make this a focus on effectiveness across the whole ecosystem. This isn't about advertising agencies, it isn't about clients, it isn't about media agencies, research agencies, and media owners. It's about all of us. And actually, we will make this industry thrive if we work together and collaborate in a better and more constructive way than we do at the moment. So I'll ask you to end by applauding the IPA for putting this together and thanking you very much for your time. And as Ed so famously said, it's that time we must put liquid on our lips.